Hello, welcome to Waypoint Survival. Today we've got an interesting episode for you. We're going to be doing an interview with the Texas Roadrunner. He's a real hobo, he's still on the road, and he's got some great things to share with us, so stay tuned. Well, it's my privilege to be here today with the Texas Roadrunner. And I've got a few questions that I want to ask him, and I think, like I said before, that you will find this interesting. So, Roadrunner, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, man. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. So where did you come from before you showed up here in the beautiful state of Ohio?
Well, we were out in Missouri. We were able to get through the southern part of Illinois, and then we ended up going through Kentucky and all the way up here to southern Ohio.
Excellent. So what's the most difficult thing that you face being a modern hobo?
I think the most difficult part of hoboing really is dealing with the weather. Especially right now, I really don't like traveling in the rain. You know, especially in the cold rain, it makes walking difficult on the highways.
So I know that you travel with a couple of dogs. What are their names and how old are they?
Well, I have Marmaduke. He is almost 5 years old. And then we have Luna. She's the new addition to the team, and she's a little over 5 months old.
That's really nice. It's always great to have companionship when you're out on the road, I'm sure.
Agreed. It really is.
Another question. Do you go hungry often, and how often do you get to eat?
I don't really find it that difficult to eat, let alone get food. I do forage a lot when I'm walking on the side of the highways, and with me always working all the time, I always make enough to get food for me and the dogs.
So you talk about work. What kind of work do you typically find or do you look for when you're out on the road in 2024?
The work I really like to do is mainly farming and ranching, but I also deal with construction, carpentry, cleanup jobs, stuff like that. Usually something for either a couple of days up to a couple of weeks.
That's very interesting. Now I noticed from some of your pictures and videos that you do carry quite a bit of gear. What's the average weight if you had to put a guesstimate on how much you carry?
I think the lowest I probably ever carried was about 20 to 25, but right now I'm probably toting about 50 pounds worth of stuff.
Well, that's not too terrible. There's a lot of modern backpackers carry about that much, and I'm sure that with your many years of expertise, you've got quite a bit of experience carrying a load. Having said that, how many years have you been on the road exactly, Roadrunner?
I've been on the road for 10 years as of this coming November.
Well, that's interesting. I'm sure you've seen a lot of great people and met some pretty wonderful folks along the way. I do know that you occasionally get out to Britt, Iowa, and you have high hopes of maybe even making Hobo King this year.
Yes, I started going to Britt in 2019, ran but lost. Haven't really been able to go back since, but I do have the opportunity to go again this year, and I have been told that I probably have a good chance of becoming king this year.
All right, I have to ask, what does it mean if you become Hobo King?
I think it depends really on the person who has the title. For me, it's representation of not only my fellow hobos, but really Americans in general, honestly, when you think about it.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be a great advocate and an outspoken person for the common working man of our age. So what time of the year does the National Hobo Convention take place in Britt, Iowa?
Well, I usually get there in late July. We are allowed to be there July 27th, but normally the actual days start up in early to mid-August.
Now, I know it's been some time, but you've done a significant amount of miles riding the rails. What is the feeling? What's it like to climb onto a boxcar and head off into the unknown?
It's a freedom that a lot of people don't get to experience anymore. You know, when you get on that train, it feels like probably the best ride in your life.
Now, you've said that this is somewhat of a dangerous life, and you wouldn't recommend that any teenager, or really any person, would try to ride the rails in modern times.
I don't believe that it's something that everybody should be doing. I haven't done it in 2 years. I prefer sticking to highways now. I do miss it. I do hope that I can at least maybe get back on the rails, but I have had my fair shares of accidents. So I tend to only do it if I'm in a situation now where I can't get out of the town or the city I'm in, and the only other way I can is by catching a train.
Now, since you live your life on the road, I know that we've got a lot of backpackers and outdoorsmen of all shapes and kinds, and some outdoors women, of course. what's the one item that you can't do without? One piece of gear that is just so essential that you have to have it all the time with you?
Oh, well, that's easy. That would have to be my hunting knife. You know, being able to make shelter, self-defense, being able to get a fire going, my hunting knife can do all of it.
Very cool. We were talking earlier off camera and you were telling me that you don't really like big cities. Now, I concur. I grew up in the country and I prefer the woods and the streams and the forests and the valleys and the meadows and all of that to the big city and the concrete jungle, as it were. But you have some of your own reasons, and I know that you can share that with us, so let's hear your reasons right now.
The main reasons I actually don't like being in big cities, aside from the ones you just stated, is they're not really hobo friendly. You know, I go out there, there's home bums and tramps and, you know, the drugs and the alcohol, and I tend to try to stay away from it, and it takes me forever to get out of the big cities. I don't like being in the big cities. Plus, when I have my dogs with me and I have to go use the restroom, for example, and I gotta go into like a restaurant, I get very scared if I come out and they're not there. I'll be terrified.
Now, I understand that you are somewhat of a musician, used to play in a band, and do you carry any instruments with you, or if you're in the hobo camp, or known as the hobo jungle, what do you like to play?
I normally like to play a lot of blues and classic country music. Normally I do carry either a guitar or maybe something related to a drum or a bass, but usually guitars.
So you like to play like a 6-string guitar? Is that what you're generally talking about?
Yeah, either a 6-string or a 12-string acoustic, something similar to that, you know.
All right, here's a big one that I'm sure all of us outdoors people want to hear. How exactly do you do laundry when you're out on the road?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so a lot of times I'll have a 5-gallon bucket with me. And I'll either go to the store and get the Tide Pods, or if I have a couple extra bars of soap with me, I'll go over and mix it in with the bucket. And basically what I do is, if it has the lid on it, which is very important with this, I'll cut a hole into the lid, take a stick, and then just start washing my clothes with the stick. Try to go over and swerve it, kind of like a churning butter in a way. You know, and then I just do it for about half an hour to 45 minutes, and then I go over and take it out, wrench it out, get the water off of it, and then I go over and hang it up over in the trees to let it dry.
That's pretty cool. Thanks so much. I've been wondering that myself. And of course, I'm sure there's times when you use you know, creeks and streams and places like that. If nothing else, even if you don't have any soap, you at least try to rinse off and wring the clothes out, let them dry out in the sun perhaps, and that can get them clean too.
Pretty much, yeah. I find it to be the easiest and the cheapest way, especially now with how inflation is and the fact that just using a simple washer alone, especially in small towns, is like almost $5 per load. It's not even worth it.
So here's a question that I get often on my YouTube channel. They say, do hobos really have phones? And I think they're thinking of like the classic days when you had maybe a phone out on a street corner and you know, like Superman would fly into there and change clothes real quick and zoom off. But these days are quite different. People actually do have cell phones. Hobos, they are not people that don't have access to Wi-Fi and things like that. So explain a little bit about how that works on the road.
I mean, I think just about everybody has a cell phone these days. Even my nephew, when he was 2 years old, had a cell phone. So, you know, the notation that us bows don't have a phone is actually kind of weird to think about. You know, especially since there's a quarter of us, like myself, who's obviously on YouTube. Then you had Stove and Shoestring and Mud and the rest of them. They all have, obviously they have phones. So the fact that they say that we don't have cell phones, or that they're surprised we have cell phones, is kind of weird to me. But yeah, I have cell phones.
Isn't it also true that there is an app that you can get that shows all the train schedules?
Actually, that is not true. The only apps you can find on your phone, if you needed it, is some rail maps that will show you who owns the line and what direction they go in. But as for train schedules, I think the only ones that they have is the one for Amtrak, and that's actually a live app that shows you where Amtrak is at the time that you're looking.
Okay, so I think a lot of us were curious about that. But again, you do have access to Wi-Fi and McDonald's. For a cup of coffee, you can sit there for a couple hours, however long you want, and use their Wi-Fi, enjoy the heat of the restaurant, or if it's cold outside. So there's a lot of options that you have. Libraries, that's another one that has free internet access. And so you can do your research and upload your YouTube videos if you don't have any other signal around. And that's actually a relatively cheap way to do it too, because you don't actually have to have a cell phone plan. You just have to have access to Wi-Fi. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, my favorite places, believe it or not, is actually going to Starbucks. Starbucks is literally the only coffee company, except for the one in Pittsburgh, Kansas, that has always treated us nicely. I could literally sit there all day and basically use their Wi-Fi, and all I ever get really is a tall hot chocolate and a brownie warmed up, and they'll let me sit there for the whole day, and to me that's amazing.
Now I understand that you still have some family around down in Texas, and how often do you call home or text home, talk to your folks, siblings, something like that?
I try to get a hold of people all the time if I can. I spoke to my mother the other day on the phone. My folks are busy. They own a couple of businesses out there. I'm not going to say which ones. But my brother is in the Marines, so I can't really talk to him. And then I am not really into contact with anybody else that, you know, sibling-wise. You know, other than that, the only ones I keep up with is my niece and nephew. That's it.
Well, that's a really proud thing that your brother is in the Marine Corps. We thank him for his service. Now, being out on the road all the time and not having a place that you call your own all the time, how do you handle cold weather? How do you handle wet weather? What's your go-to? I mean, do you carry gear for that? And what does that look like?
So, believe it or not, I actually prefer to be out in snowy, cold weather. I really do not like the heat. To combat that, though, I do have a good one-person tent that me and the dogs sleep out of. I also have, thanks to you, a wool blanket. I have my 2 Woolby military blankets, and then I also have 2 tarps, a East German strip tarn tarp that is canvas I've been using for 6 years, and then just another regular old brown blue tarp that I use as a ground tarp. And I basically got it down to the point where if we have the tent up and it's snowing, I will look outside to go use the restroom, and it's literally so hot in our tent that it melts the snow around the tent. I've literally have tried this.
So I don't know the answer to this, but when we were going over the questions that I was going to ask you and trying to come up with what would be interesting to our viewers, I'm supposed to ask, why don't you like driving and flying?
Okay, excuse me. The reason I don't like flying is because I've always thought of planes, especially jet passenger planes, as death tubes. And every time I hear of a accident in the air, it's usually not good, just to put it simple. The reason I don't like driving, though, is because of the fact that I've always felt that, I mean, I have 2 good legs. I can walk everywhere. I can usually walk within 15 to 18 miles in a day, especially during the night, if longer. So it really didn't make sense to me why I should spend so much money not only getting a license, but also getting a vehicle, getting gas, getting insurance, doing all this maintenance work, and then still having problems, which I have had in the past after I did get my license. And to be honest, I feel like once I got my license, that was when I lost both of my girls too. So because of that, I really just don't like driving.
Now when you say you lost both your girls, you mean your dogs, right?
Right. I had my first original service dog was Xena, and she was such a lovely black lab. I honestly think you would have loved her, but she after I went to go get my first truck registered, she ended up getting killed that morning by another dog. So that wasn't a really good day for me. And then 5 months later, Avery ended up drinking radiator fluid and sadly died from kidney failure.
And that's really sad. And I'm sure after that, you'd just rather go on foot.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like I'm in a lot more control of where I can go, especially when it comes to the dogs. I don't have to worry about them getting radiator fluid. I can always look at them. We're always walking. I honestly feel more safe when we're walking. Even when we're on the side of the highway, I always feel more safe doing that.
So how do you get mail when you're out on the road?
Oh, that's easy. So the United States Postal Service actually has a option for not only people like me, but like RVers, van dwellers, etc., where if you're in a town you don't live in and you need to get a package sent to you, you can actually go to the Postal Service, request that you have everything through general delivery, and then normally you have to wait for about a week or two, depending on how far away the package is, to have it sent to you. It's free on my end, but it's, the other person has to pay.
What's your favorite place that you've ever been on your hobo journeys?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Honestly, I'm a big fan of northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, especially Chama, New Mexico. The people there, they're really nice, very sweet. There's a guy there that runs I guess you could call it a general store of sorts, right across the street from the train station, and he sells all these different railroad patches from every single company, both back then and now. And then towns like Campbell, Missouri, the now former mayor of that town is, I consider, a friend of mine. Every time I go through there, he always puts me to work, and the townsfolk in Campbell are very nice. As far as I know, I've never had anybody complain about us. If anything, everybody's usually treated us very nicely, made sure we always had everything we need, and if we needed a ride out of town to another town, then they did that. So, Campbell, Missouri, if you're watching this, I love you.
Now, I understand that one of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to keep the classic hobo concept alive. A lot of the videos that I've been filming are along that line. And so we're talking about those men and women during the 1930s, specifically during the Great Depression period, who had to go around and find work. And they were people who had good morals, they were hardworking, and they really just wanted to make money to either send back home or to support themselves. And I think that's something you'd like to speak to, isn't it?
Yeah, the classic era of the hobos is my favorite era. To me, it basically speaks of what my character is in real life. I don't just do this for the videos and then go out and hold a sign. I'd never held a sign, by the way, if anybody's wondering. I don't panhandle. But, I do enjoy the Great Depression era. I've done so much research on it in the last few years. And then even then, I don't know everything. When I started seeing your videos from like 3 years ago, and then I saw that you're starting to do more of the hobo series, and that you're doing a lot of it from like the 1800s up to like 1930s to the 40s, I realized that basically 2/5 of what you're filming, I didn't even know much about. And I thought that was amazing. I loved it. The clothespins, the haversacks and everything. Oh yeah. Some of that stuff even I didn't know. But yeah, I do try to keep it going, I do try to find every town I go through, I do always try to find work. I always look on Facebook, Craigslist, I'll go to community boards in person. I'll look everywhere. I'll accept a job, as long as it's, moral and legal, of course.
Talking about how you get your food, are you on government assistance, and how do you feel about drugs and alcohol?
Now that's a very good question. One that really does not get brought up much. I've never been on government assistance in my life. Never really accepted handouts. I don't like laziness. I do believe that there are families and people out there who do need that assistance, but the sad part about it is that about 80% of people on government assistance really don't need it, or they never tried to get off of it. As for the drugs and the alcohol, I've never been on anything, never drank in my life, never done drugs. Honestly, being around people who do kind of freak me out. The violent tendencies, the outbursts, it's very uncomfortable for me personally. So, normally if I do see somebody, when you're on the road for that long, you can actually tell, when you see somebody on drugs or alcohol or whatever it is that they're on. You know, so normally when I do see somebody on any substance, I normally try to avoid them as much as possible. But sometimes, you know, people like that are unavoidable.
Here's another question for you. There have been some amazing hobos in the past. If you had to pick just one hobo hero, the guy that's at the top of the list, someone that you look forward to, that you really admire, who would that be?
I think I'm going to have to put it in two different spots. If we're looking at the old traditional hobos, especially back then, the old days, Steam Train Maury was always my hero. He's actually the reason why I want to be Hobo King. Just the things he did when he was on the road, you know, he was also talking to people. He'd go visit hospitals, schools, jails, etc. and literally it would bring people's spirits up. And he advocated for hobo rights too, you know. I feel like if it wasn't for Steam Train Maury, I feel like maybe in a way, and I could be wrong, but I feel like maybe in a way the culture we know it now probably would not be as relevant as it is these days. But in modern eras, my all-time favorite hobo is actually my former riding partner who's now retired, Crazy Cooter, and I've known him for about 7 or 8 years, and a lot of what I actually do now I learned from him. And I feel like if it wasn't for Cooter, I honestly probably would have been basically either off the road or worse.
All right, well, thanks so much. And Cooter, hats off to you. Thanks so much for showing our guy the ropes and getting him started and keeping him safe all those years. Now, before we sign off completely, I understand that sometimes you give inspirational talks to churches and youth groups and places like that, and you want to give a disclaimer about being out on the road and even sometimes being a modern hobo. So what is that you share with those crowds and those congregations?
Honestly, the one thing I really try to get to people, especially teenagers, preteens, etc., is really the rail lines, the highways, hoboing in general really is not something for the young people. I don't like seeing kids walking on train lines, which I actually have videos of them doing. I don't like seeing kids hopping over trains just to get over somewhere. It scares me to death, and every time I actually see something about it on the news, I actually do cry. You know, I feel like these kids, especially the ones that either have been injured or sadly do die, have basically thrown their life away because a lot of times they don't understand rail safety. And even when you do go out and talk to these kids, whether in person or if you comment on a video, it seems like nobody really heeds the warnings, especially from someone like myself or Crazy Cooter or anybody else. You know, we do try to make sure kids don't go on trains, but again, it just seems like nobody listens. So my point of this is, please, I don't care who you are, what you've seen on YouTube, even if it was me or Mr. Bender's videos, I don't care if you're even 21. Please do not be riding on freight trains, especially when you have no idea what you're doing. These trains are dangerous. They have no respect for you, and they will run you over, and sadly you will die. I actually had an accident in Clovis, New Mexico back in 2016, and I had fallen off the side of a train and almost died. Bleeding literally off the top of my head with blood gushing out. It was that bad. So all I'm asking is please do not ride trains. It's really not that worth it anymore. That's the reason why I walk now these days.
Yeah, that's very serious. And I know sometimes kids walk the tracks with their earbuds in and they're just not paying attention and the train comes up behind them. Right. Very, very dangerous situation. Well, I really appreciate you joining me around the campfire for a little campfire chat. And I hope we get to meet again someday. And thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks for the invite. I love it here. Thank you.